Hi, thanks for watching. My name's Karylle Phillips, and if you're interested in any of the services that I offer, please go to www.karylephillips.co.uk. Really, the idea of this video or the series of videos that I will be uploading to YouTube are really surrounding some of the questions people have asked me either via email or at conferences or in during training and etc. And I kind of got the thought that how about if I created some opportunities for people to directly ask me questions and I would answer them or cover certain areas or topics that they wanted to know and hopefully kind of inform or in some way improve their practice. So whether you're a teacher or a social worker or a student in any sector, please get in touch if there's any areas that really interest you in relation to the experiences of looked after children, and I will definitely try and aim to cover them and answer them for you. Today's video, really, I just wanted to cover some areas that many people are looking into at the minute or who are trying to figure out, especially in relation to looked after children in schools. Now, I say we all, the majority of us within social work and now especially within schools and education are recognising that looked after children are not achieving as well as their peers. And a lot of pressure has been put on to both local authority, social workers, private agencies and teaching staff to come up with ways in which how we can improve this and how we can make sure the experiences of looked after children are similar to their peers and they achieve ultimately the same successes their peers do. When people have asked me for my experiences of what it's been like to be in care and be in school, I'm always happy to share them. And I will throughout the rest of this video. But first of all, I just wanted to start with three key messages that I feel are highly important and that may or may not help you to really understand maybe some of the reasons or the background to why looked after children are not achieving as highly as their peers. The first key message really centres on teacher training. Now, I know currently there's a lot happening right now and there are some huge movements being made within schools and within social work education for looked after children. I recognise that when I was in care this was not the case, and a lot is changing. We now have virtual school head teachers, we now have designated teachers, pupil premiums, so forth, and a lot more focus and emphasis has been and will be put on how we can improve the outcomes for looked after children. However, I still go back to teacher training purely because it's how it's carried out. It's how we do this. Now, I'm not suggesting for one moment that teachers start becoming social work professionals and that we start giving them social work degree courses or courses in relation to that, because I recognise that it is genuinely is a specialised field. However, what I do suggest is that for teachers to receive training around the experiences of looked after children, and I do strongly believe that care experienced young people are equipped to provide some of those experiences or share some of those stories to help teachers to understand just some of the day-to-day issues that they face with being in care and being in school. I recently spoke at a conference for virtual school heads, designated teachers and other teaching staff around how we can improve the education attainment for looked after children. And before I attended the conference, I was thinking about how can I explain to these group of professionals in a short space of time just how it feels to be in care and how it feels to be in school. And one of the things that hit me very early on when I was preparing my speech was that maybe let's take them back to school. Let me give them an idea of what they know. So as opposed to me telling them, look, life was hard, this is what I have to deal with, this is all this stuff, maybe they're aware of that, maybe they're not, but will that help them to improve how they teach or practice within their schools? So what I did instead is I provided them with a bit of an insight, which is what I call the two timetables. Now, the two timetables really are a way of describing, the best that I know anyway, what it's like to be in school and be in care. And so on one hand, you have your academic timetable. So whether you're in primary school, junior school, first school or middle school, you have a timetable that outlines all your weekly subjects, your lessons, what you must do, the boundaries, your teachers, everything. Okay. So when I explained to the delegates at this conference that that's a normal process, all children, looked after children included, have a timetable, and that's one of the requirements of attending school, that you adhere to this timetable. I said, so let's look through that timetable. So on a weekly basis, we will have maths, we will have English, we will have all the other lessons and subjects that come with being in school for whatever age you're at. The difference here is, though, when I asked the delegates, so how hard was school? I want you to think about how hard it was. We all kind of really understood and agreed that school is hard. It's hard for everyone. It's absolutely hard for everyone. For every child, school is a difficult time. Not only do you have to adhere to these boundaries and this timetable set upon you by this education establishment, but you also have to deal with some of the other things that people, as adults, we tend to overlook, which is social relationships, which is, where do we fit in? Are we the clever one? Are we the famous one? Are we not so popular? Who are we within this circle of friends and within our peer groups as well? And that can be really hard. So that social identity comes into play as well when we're thinking about what life is like for all children being in school. Then I explained to the delegates that on top of this timetable and on top of some of the struggles school life can bring for all children, we are sometimes overlooking the other timetable that looked after children have to deal with. Now, on this timetable, this is not a timetable that runs alongside our school timetable. This is not a timetable that merges with our school timetable. Instead, this new timetable, which is what I like to call the care system timetable, begins to conflict with our school timetable. It starts to push out certain days and areas that you may have found interesting previous to coming into care. It now consumes everything you do and every action you make throughout the week. Now, the care timetable, unlike the school timetable, is not set in stone. It's not as clear and it's not as obvious as having your planner from school. Your teachers tell you exactly where you need to be and that's where you need to go. And there's a whole group of you all following this timetable, so you don't feel as though you are standing out or you're the odd one instead. But with the care system timetable now, you recognise very early on that everybody has to adhere to this one. And on top of that, you kind of still aren't clear what it is you're supposed to do. Nobody's really explained to you that on Tuesdays you have a LAC review, but they can be wherever you want them to be, whether they're at school or at your home. And they might not be on Tuesday next month or the week after that or the months after that. Then you might have a pet meeting on a Thursday, but this so happens to coincide with your lunch break. So you now have to miss out on lunchtime with your other peers so you can go and sit in another meeting that you still are unsure whether you have to attend or whether you should attend. And the differences with the care timetable, as I really, really want to emphasize, especially to teaching professionals, is that there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee. And so you can spend so much time, unlike a school timetable, really trying to figure it out, really trying to grapple with some kind of, is there a pattern to this? What am I making out of this? Whereas with the school timetable, it's set in stone. It stays like that for the whole term. The whole year you are at school, whatever year you are in, it stays that way. The care system timetable doesn't seem to do that. It changes when you're least expecting it. It's changing constantly when you're unaware that it's changing. And it's this young people, especially looked after young people in schools, are struggling with. And they can spend so much time trying to figure out what the care system timetable is saying, that unfortunately the education and focusing on that timetable and sitting in lesson and concentrating no longer becomes the number one priority. Because on one hand, the school timetable is highly important, and we try wherever possible to explain to all children coming to school is for a reason and the importance of why you should come to school. However, the care system timetable really does show children and young people just how devastating and how upsetting or hurtful the consequences of not adhering or of not being involved or not being aware of that system really can be on your life. Now, for young people in school, everywhere, explaining to a child at the age of 10 that if you don't go to school, your life at the age of 20 plus is going to be really difficult for you. They can't see that. They can't see that far ahead. We know children do not think that far in the future, especially at that young age. So we kind of understand that children need to be, I suppose, provided with the opportunity to recognise what it is that they want to do. So we do that in schools. We nurture that out of them. We recognise they're not going to see it straight away. We need to give them the opportunity so they can see that. Yet the care system timetable, you recognise very early on, being a looked after child, that this is something that will impact your life. That if you don't go to this LAC review, that you might not see your parents because they missed contact last week, and they might not come for the next contact, and that this one meeting might be the only chance you get to see them. So you recognise that these things are important. Whether you understand them or not is a different thing, but you recognise that this timetable is important. You slowly become very aware that the meetings with your social worker all of a sudden become important, because as much as you don't want to see her or him, you very early on realise that there's a consequence if you don't. And that consequence isn't necessarily an intentional consequence, but at the next meeting or the next time you're around all these adults, you start to hear changes and things, plans being put in place for you that you weren't aware of. And the reason being that they give you is that, well, you didn't turn up for that meeting that we arranged, or you didn't turn up to your LAC review. So you all of a sudden now become a 10-year-old whose whole life has changed overnight from entering care, whose whole world has been turned upside down, but yet you recognise very early on that this social work timetable is the most important one. It's only this one. There's nobody else to explain it to you. School don't understand it. School don't understand. The teachers don't understand what's happening. Because if they did, what you would find is that whilst everybody else is at little Johnny's party at the weekend, and you didn't get to go because CRB checks haven't been done, your carers aren't completely aware of what delegated authority is, for whatever reasons you're completely unaware of, but you couldn't go that weekend. Plus, you then find out you've had contact, and contact has yet again been cancelled. So you spend the whole weekend on this emotional roller coaster of hurt, upset, anger, frustration, or just complete at a loss with what is happening with your life. So you stay up all weekend, you're fighting with your carers, you're arguing with other members of your family, you're maybe falling out with other children within that home or placement, and you turn up at school Monday morning late, slightly late, but to a teacher it's very late if you're not there at 9 o'clock on time on lesson, and your teacher asks you, why are you late? And at that point you've got two choices. Do you tell the truth and say, well, actually this weekend I've just realised what a complete mess my life is, and I'm 10 years old and I don't know how to cope with these emotions, and that actually maybe the social workers were right and my parents couldn't put my needs before their own because they completely cancelled contact without letting me know, and I've had quite a crappy weekend and I haven't slept very well, and in all honesty I don't really want to be here, but I have to come? Or do you take the other route, which is the easier route of just saying, I don't know, I'm late, I don't care, I don't like this lesson, and either disrupting the lesson or disengaging completely from teachers? And it's usually the latter that you choose. You never really, as a looked after child, have an opportunity to really say what's going on, because you don't really understand it yourself, and you can't explain to somebody else the feelings you have if you're not completely aware of them. You go from being hurt and upset and 5 minutes later being completely angry and annoyed, and you don't know who to vent at. You don't know who the cause of all that hurt and pain is supposed to be aimed at. Is it your parents? Are you angry with them? Is it your teachers? Is it your foster carers? Or is it your social worker? And then you come into school and you have that extra pressure of, right, you've got to adhere to this new timetable now, this school timetable again, because that's just what you have to do in school. And I just think if teachers really understood some of the things, some of the day-to-day issues young people go through, now some of the things I've mentioned with reviews, pet meetings and contact are just on a small scale of some of the issues being in care can pull up for you as a child. It's a lot more than that, and it's not knowing who to talk to about that and not having anybody really understand it. And so you take on this whole approach really that school is not that interesting and it's not that serious. And that can be said for a lot of children in general, that school just seems like a time when you go and meet your friends. But for a looked after child, the realities of the impact school can have on your life are nowhere near devastating to the realities social work can have on your life. So you no longer make education a number one priority. Instead, you make figuring out social work systems, the roles of these different professionals and where you are placed in that and how you may survive this, your number one priority. And I think if we give teachers or provide teachers with some of these experiences and some of the feelings looked after children can really experience and some of the difficulties that they go through, teachers can understand a little bit more and can probably and hopefully appreciate that, do you know what, they turned up at school after everything they've probably been through this week, this weekend, and all the meetings I'm more than aware that they're attending and all the other stuff that's going on. The fact that they turned up at school is a pretty big deal.